I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Kai-Uwe Bergman. He is a partner at Bjarke Ingels Group, and we are so excited to have him here. So give a nice, warm round of applause for Kai-Uwe Bergman.
All right. Very, very happy to be here. I'm, let's see, everything's connected. But it's a chance really for me, who oftentimes sort of spends time in the office, to actually come out and present sort of our thinking, our process with you, and to share kind of like how we think about architecture. And I think what I'd like to begin with is that we don't view architecture as sort of merely doing buildings or projects. It's really to sort of expand what architecture can do, what design can do. And so it's trying to see if we can actually start to engage with the world around us, the systems around us. So thinking about energy systems, transportation systems, cities, resiliency, all of those things that are sort of a much larger network of things, and seeing how then the design process can actually engage on that scale, and that how that scale then translates to buildings and the spaces that we live in. So this is where I just came from a couple of hours ago. Can I get the lights off in the front right here? This is about 1.5 years ago when Superstorm Sandy hit Manhattan and basically left a large portion of Manhattan in the dark. We actually had a brand new neighborhood in which I lived and worked called Sopo, south of Power. It was actually, I think, pretty dramatic when you think of that the subway is about 120 years old and it had never been flooded once before. So a kind of a seminal moment for the city and the region, in which about $60 billion worth of damage had hit the northeast corridor. And when you consider what areas of Manhattan actually flooded, it's pretty much the Manhattan that the first Vikings who came in, basically everything that was there stayed dry. And all of the infill that occurred over the past 300 to 400 years is actually what flooded. So when you look at the FEMA flood map, it is all of the infill that we have, you know, grown both the Hudson River and into the East River. We took part in a competition called Rebuild by Design. The idea that you would take some of the money, there were $50 billion allocated from Congress to kind of fix things and items in Manhattan and the Northeast Corridor. And $5 billion of that is earmarked to be spent on actually not only putting a Band-Aid on things, but also fixing them and hoping to prevent another Sandy from occurring in the future. So we won that competition as one of sort of 6 members, 6 teams, to create the Big U. The idea of creating an 8-mile-long infrastructure or resiliency design that would prevent future flooding from occurring, but at the same time allowing that moment to actually create open space and park space along the entire perimeter of Manhattan. So very similar to the way that the High Line takes an old train infrastructure and places a park on top. The idea that you kind of think about how the people actually can utilize the space and the infrastructure that's protecting them. So we would basically create a dry line, this 8-mile-long stretch, and place activities and to green space, open space that the city desperately needs. So all of the different neighborhoods that are adjacent to the water, stretching from Hell's Kitchen in the north to Battery Park in the south, and then back up to the Upper East Side. Those are all areas that are affected, and there are sort of natural pinch points along that flood map where the geology of and the geography of Manhattan makes the flooding sort of a much sort of thinner space. And much like there are hulls of a ship where one section of the hull could flood, but it doesn't take the entire ship down, we are going to compartmentalize and create a berm that literally creates compartments within Manhattan that are then also reflective of the neighborhoods that are behind to sort of protect that part of Manhattan. So the Big U is in a sense a berm, or you could say a protective wall, but a wall kind of disconnects people from the coast. And what we are trying to do with this protective wall is to make a bench, or to make a theater, to make a place for people to actually use the wall in many different ways all along that 8-mile stretch. And so it would look like this for most of the time, 99% of the time, and then when surges or weather would come in, then it also protects the same city. So instead of having SOPO, it's the idea that you could actually then protect the city on that scale. So I'm happy to say that the first compartment has been financed by $335 million. This was announced by HUD just a few months ago. And so within about 5 years, we're going to have about a mile-long stretch of that area protecting that part of Lower East Side. And our hope is that once we get that first step, that we could actually then wrap it around the rest of Manhattan. So you could say that this is a moment in Copenhagen when Obama came over in 2009 and was trying to work with all of the European leaders and worldwide leaders to come up with a climate plan, a UN climate plan. And it was very evident in this very moment that it wasn't going to work out. I mean, no one here is really having fun or is at a party. It was also the realization that these things aren't going to happen on a, you could say, an international scale, that we locally have to address the ideas of climate change and the ideas of doing something so that we literally take it from a macro level to a local level. And that means that, you know, you in your capacity, the city, the mayor in their capacity, can also address a lot of these things locally, and then in a sort of combined effort, we would have an influence on a much more larger level. So as architects, we actually become involved in policy. This is at the EU in Brussels, where we take part in talking about what kind of zoning could be considered in terms of thinking about global warming and climate change. Being invited to 10 Downing Street. So Bjarke Ingels Group, or BIG, is the idea that we take this thinking of the architectural design process onto a much larger policy level sort of decision making. And we have offices in both New York and in Copenhagen. This is our office in Copenhagen. There's New York. So we're about 200 people at the moment. And we work in these kind of multidisciplinary groups, much like yourselves. And it's the idea of hedonistic sustainability is the idea that sustainability doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have to mean that you take cold showers, or that you fly less, or that you have small windows and large walls of insulation, because that's literally giving up something. It's a very Puritan approach to sustainability. We're talking about a sustainability that if you can create a better quality of life somewhere that uses the resources that we have in a much more efficient way, then we have created literally a opportunity where people will migrate to the better quality of life because it's just human nature to. And so that's what we're trying to do with the projects that we do. And in this little sort of pictogram, it's the idea that the way that we layer our cities, the way that we live within them, affects how we use our resources. So when you consider, say, just an average supermarket, and you buy frozen chicken, that freezing of the chicken requires energy, and its byproduct is actually heat. And right now, you can walk by any supermarket, and you would actually have heat coming out of that supermarket because of all the refrigerator aisles. Is there a possibility of actually being able to layer our cities, our functions, in such a way that you could put apartments on top of supermarkets, take the frozen chicken air, channel it into the bathroom floors, and have heated bathroom floors in the middle of the winter? So it's seeing how we can create energy loops, looping one energy cycle and the waste product of that turning into another energy cycle into another one, and repeat that as often as you can. So one of those projects that we've done recently, and it's under construction, is the Copenhagen power plant, waste-to-energy power plant. And this woman asked for architects to design a power plant, which is pretty phenomenal because that's usually the realm of engineers. And power plants usually look like, you know, boxes with big smokestacks. So it's a very utilitarian building. But what you're going to notice is that power plants are going to become more and more integrated into our cities. They're going to probably become a little bit smaller, and especially with waste-to-energy plants, the closer they are to where the dump trucks are and the trash trucks, the better, because then they don't have as far to travel. So Denmark is an interesting case because for the past 60 years, it's a tiny little country. They don't have a lot of land. So what they do with their waste is that they burn it for electricity. So literally 54% of all waste is burned and turned into electricity and heat. 42% gets recycled, and only 4% goes into landfills. If we were here in Raleigh, North Carolina, 1% gets recycled and 99% goes into landfills. So right here, there's already something which is quite interesting in that we actually produce in our waste a viable energy alternative because we could recycle it or burn it and create that energy loop that I was referring to before. This energy plant is smack dab in the middle of Copenhagen. So even the Queen of Denmark actually sees it from her bedroom window. So it better look good. So 400,000 tons of waste go in, and 550,000 citizens get their electricity from it. It's going to be the biggest development, the biggest building in the history of Denmark when it's done. It's 100 meters tall, and it's just volumetrically huge. Right now, when a Danish person would like to go skiing, because it's an extremely flat country, they literally have to drive 8 hours to Sweden, and then ski for a day or two, and then drive 8 hours back. So already, that idea of the carbon footprint of literally just having to, you know, enjoy skiing for a couple of days. So we thought if we're building the tallest and one of the biggest buildings in Denmark, why don't we graft a ski slope on top of it? This idea is that, you know, we're in Scandinavia, it snows, everyone loves skiing, so why don't we actually experience, you know, we have mountains of trash, we love mountains of snow, why don't we combine the two? And so we took a normal factory with the smokestack, where we have a vision of grafting this ski slope on top. We have black diamond, blue, green slopes. We get up through an elevator all the way to the top, and then we can create a real recreational sort of facility all around it. And we won the competition because we literally created something smack dab in the city that the people could actually use, that people would actually want. So instead of having NIMBYs saying not in my backyard, all the people living around here are actually YIMBYs. Yes, that's exactly what I'd love to in my backyard. So the factory also has this it has the snow about 2 or 3 months of the year, so you can ski on natural snow heading down. But you're also going to be able in the summer to go bikini boarding because it's actually a synthetic layer or mat of recycled plastic. And this is a technology that already exists. This is a pile of trash, a mountain of trash in France, and for 20 years they've been skiing down it on a plastic mat. Actually, alpine teams come there to train during the summer months. They have moguls, half pipes, you name it, they've got everything, and they just ski down just as you would on snow. So our hope is that this building actually becomes almost an icon for the city of Copenhagen, but also for the country of Denmark, as to look at us. We care about how we're going to use our waste. We try to recycle. What we can't recycle, we burn. So it becomes kind of also a means for a country and a city and the mayors to actually celebrate the idea of investing. So here's the construction site. 8 cranes. It's going up. It's going to be finished in 2017. And maybe you noticed in some of the pictures that we actually are going to create smoke rings out of this one. The idea here is that if you have a smokestack that just blows smoke straight out of that smokestack, you have no means of knowing how much is actually being burned inside. By being able to puff out smoke rings, where a smoke ring is equal to 1 ton of carbon that's burned, we're actually creating a communicative tool with the entire citizens of Copenhagen to actually figure out, what are we doing? And so you'll be able to sit there with your girlfriend or your boyfriend and say, look dear, 3 tons of carbon were just burned. And we're going to do this actually by collecting the water vapor and then through an hydraulic press pushing it out into a smoke ring. This has never been done before at this scale. So it's something that we've been now spending almost a year. So when you come in 2017, you'll be able to ski and see the smoke rings puff out the top. So we've been spending the last couple of years really trying to develop the technology to make this happen. Because you can't go to a store or a catalog and order one of these things. So we literally have been working to create and test these. And I'm actually happy to say that just last week, on the 26th of August, this is our 4th test of creating a smoke ring. This should be on sound.
Det er fandme godt. Ej, hvor er det vigtigt. Hvor er det vigtigt.
So needless to say, we can now actually create these smoke rings, and it's something that is actually quite invigorating, that you actually have a client, you have a country and a city and a mayor that actually want to support something of this magnitude, and that architects are actually along for the ride. Going from one ring to a few other rings, Audi, the car company, came to us and said, hey guys, we would like for you to think about the future with you. We're like, why would you ask architects? They said, well, when you guys do renderings of the future, it's usually really happy people on bicycles. It's very rare that you have an automobile in your renderings of the future. So they're like, please help us sell cars. And so we said, well, okay, we'll do a little bit of research for you guys. The 4 rings are actually 4 different auto companies that came together at the turn of the century. They're very, very proud that they are, they have the technical sort of innovation that occurs. And we said, what are you guys? And then they said, well, we're a car company. And we said, actually, you're more like a mobility company. And imagine if you actually had like Audi bikes, or Audi trains, or Audi blades. Think about the Audi experience no matter what the technology is that you're actually using. So that you actually talk about the experience, the Audi experience, no matter what you're doing. Well, they really liked where we were going, and they said, here's some money, please develop this idea further. So then we got into driverless sort of technology, and with them we said, we would like to actually help you get out of this situation, which we think is actually one of the reasons that people shy away from cars. And since the 1970s, there have been a lot of technological advancements on driverless technology, of like cars driving themselves. So even in '95, you had sort of 8 cars that were all hooked up, GPS, that were driving by themselves at this point. And what you'll notice is the distance between the cars you basically know exactly where all the cars are versus the kind of irrational distance that you have from this driver to this one because how crazy that person is driving. You have no idea. So you need to keep that distance. And that distance is what everything is sort of based on. Every exit, the speed with which you drive, and so forth. So with all of this driverless technology, we're fine with getting into a subway that drives by itself, or we're also fine sitting in a plane on cruise control. Tom Cruise has been on cruise control his entire life. And you'll notice that cars are beginning to sort of become more and more automated. They can self-park. They can, brake on themselves. So if you start looking at the geometries of cities and how this relates to driving, this is Barcelona, the medieval part that's purely based on the foot, walking. This is the same city, Barcelona, but now we have the horse and carriage. So you have boulevards, and you have a grid. Then you have the evolution of mass transit, of metros, where people would live in garden cities on the periphery of cities like Moscow, pop up out of a metro station, and then go into sort of a green oasis with very large housing blocks. And then you have Los Angeles, which is purely based on the automobile, where this is the interchange of the 405 and the 10. And if we take this and scale it, this is the center of Copenhagen, the medieval part. Imagine how much space we take up just to move cars into 4 different directions. So we can say that city planning for the last 100 years has really been driven by transportation engineers because they're trying to get cars from one place to another at certain speeds, and that requires certain distances. So the question that we have is could there be a paradigm shift where we begin as architects to once again be included in this discussion about how our cities should be shaped? And if we look at the driverless technology where you could have up to 14 cars in the same space as 4 cars, then you could start to really think about how we actually use space. Currently, we take up about 15% of our cities with just the asphalt, which is static. It's just there. And we could actually, with driverless technology, have the same amount of people in 5% of the space. That leaves 10% for either future growth, because there'll be more of us, or we could create a financing system that actually would allow us to create a new way of transporting. So if this is a normal intersection and there's rules and all kinds of ways of actually turning left and right, we see the future of travel as being more of like schools of fish. You put in the address that you want to go, you sit back, and the car takes you there. Irrespective of, it is communicating with everything around it and finding the best way to get from point A to point B. It knows all of the information. Is there a parade? Is there a traffic accident? Is there an obstacle? So that it's very similar to, if you think about it, you go to Manhattan, you don't need to drive in Manhattan. You just walk up, you put your hand up, a yellow car ends, you tell them where you want to go, you sit back, and you get there. You don't really think about or know how you got there or if that was the best way, but the driver is, in that sense, the computer, the GPS, and all of those things combined. So it's kind of a cultural thing that we already do to some degree. And Audi gave us another little pile of money to show what this could be in terms of a street, a smart street. So we have this LED street where the car is moving, and in real time, the people and the obstacles that move in front of it will actually dictate the way that that car drives. So in this case, if there's an obstacle as this person is nearing the car will veer off into a different direction. If there's a skateboard that becomes an obstacle, the car will stop, and then the car will begin driving again. So this was the idea that we could create intelligent streets that use the information that is all around us to actually create a much more efficient way of using the space. which then also has an effect on the way cities are built. So here again, it's an architecture office that's working on transportation systems. And here we're trying to do now is get Manhattan to agree to one block of Manhattan where we could actually go in and start to put the smart street down in one block and see how it would inform the city. So a lot of our work is actually through engagement and the public process. This is another outdated transportation system. This is Copenhagen around the 1920s. And you can see how the rail lines really cut swaths through the entire city, disconnecting one part of the city from another. And then once the automobile came, then this swath that's right here in the middle of the city became disused. They tore up the tracks, and it became kind of like a backyard, but not a very nice backyard. This is where folks would kind of do drugs, or it's where folks would get beaten up. So it was kind of like a leftover space that no one really liked and appreciated. So the city then had a competition, and they asked architects and landscape architects to come up with an idea on how to manage this 1 kilometer long stretch of land. We came up with an idea to create a red square, a black market, and a green park. And we, as designers, would take a seat back, and because this entire neighborhood is made up of like 60 different immigrant populations, so people from 60 different countries live in this area of Copenhagen. And we, instead of telling the immigrants who had come over, please sit on this Danish bench, or please drink from this Danish fountain, or read under this Danish lamppost, we asked them for their lampposts, for their benches. And so we, through newspapers, through the radio, through workshops, we gathered 1,000 different ideas on what could be in this park. And then we selected 108 of them. And so what we became were like curators in the gallery. We then just basically placed all of these objects throughout that 1 kilometer space. So the bench, the gymnastic equipment, even the artwork are all pieces that have been collected from different cultures. And then it's amazing to see how the folks really resonated and took that to mean that this is their park. Even the palm trees are actually sourced from other parts of the planet. So in this case, this is Chinese palm trees that grow in a Scandinavian climate. And it's the idea, not everything that we chose made it into the park. This is a swing from Estonia, and the insurance agent for the city said, no way. So we tried, believe me. But we did get the swing set from Baghdad. There are 6 of them now in Copenhagen. We got a slide from Chernobyl, which was radioactive. We had to rebuild it in Copenhagen. A real red sign, a red square sign from Moscow. Bollards from Ghana that are now in Copenhagen. Benches are incredible. You can really tell a lot about a culture. This is a bench from Spain and Mexico where 2 lovers look at each other in their eyes, tell them that they love each other. This is a bench from Brussels, where this is the seat of the EU. No one looks at each other. They all looking in different directions. This is what you would find in DC right there. And then a slide from a Japanese gentleman who had slid down this when he was a kid, and we had the Japanese craftsman come over and build it in Copenhagen. From the United States, of course, a donut sign. Donuts which you can't actually purchase. From Qatar, a dentist sign. And here are the folks that actually, made these suggestions. So in many ways, we have become kind of an empowerment, crowdsourcing this park for the people who live there. And then they celebrate. I mean, this is the rainiest day, and they're out there wanting to open it. A small project, so looking at also scale. Not everything has to be big. This is Bjarke's high school, where he went to high school, and his math teacher became the principal of the school, and the first thing the principal wanted to do was to go back to one of his pupils and let him build something on the campus as kind of a sign of being proud. So the school is a rather small private school, and they wanted a new, like, handball court. Handball's popular in Denmark. And you know, you could have built it out here, but that's exactly where all the kids play soccer. So that wasn't going to work. So the only place was to build it in the courtyard, but you wouldn't be very sort of popular if you took away the courtyard from the students. So then we basically bury it. Now remember, it was the math teacher. So Bjarke thought it would be wonderful if he actually created the building as a mathematic formula. So the roof of the hall is actually the same as the ballistic arch. And what we have is a sort of a glue-lam beam, similar to you guys' airports that I just flew in. So you have those massive glue-lam beams, and we just basically created it as the arch. So this is completely underground. It has daylight coming in from the sides, and then the roof, which we call the molehill, it also could be like a pregnant school campus courtyard, actually is still active, and people can still use it. People sit on top, they study there, and so it's really trying to find a way where you can have both. You can have the handball hall, the athletic hall that you want, but you also have the courtyard. And I think that's another project that sort of shows how you can think about things in multiple ways. We're doing also the project for Lego. This is every architect's dream, is to actually create a museum, a brand museum for Lego, which will open next year. It's of course it's a product made by a Danish family, and in the main city, on the main square, it's a very tiny city. I think it has 6,000 people in the city. So in the main square, they're talking about creating a museum, but they would like it to be almost all open to the public, and then have a small museum that you would actually pay admission to. So everything on the street level is open to the public, and then the entire roof is a series of terraces that's also open to the public. And so as a series of kind of building blocks with different programs, we're able to create this kind of very playful and very public space. That is that's the way that you actually open or enter it from the bottom. You move up to the second level where the reception is, and then in the basement there's a vault, which actually has one copy or one version of every Lego set they've ever made. And there's this group called AFOLs, Adult Fans of Lego, and for them this is like their Shangri-La. Like, they come here and pray to see that first yellow castle set from 1978. And so it's really making something where it's very, very handcrafted as well. We're working with the the terracotta maker to create three-dimensional tiles that can take the corners, which we just broke ground on. And just to conclude on a couple of projects here in North America, because the question is really, can some of this thinking that occurs in Europe be brought over to places like here? And the idea and the answer is yes. This is in Vancouver, beautiful site. The guy got it really cheap, our client, and he was so excited, and he said, I want you to work on this right away. We looked at it and we said, well, you have to have 5-foot setbacks for the sidewalk. You have an on-ramp through your site, so you have, to make way for that. That has a 100-foot setback. You can't cast a shadow on that park, so, sir, here you go. So, he wasn't very happy when he realized that all he would be able to really build on this site was this kind of triangular shape that wasn't very efficient. We went back to the city and just asked a simple question. If we owned the air rights over everything, couldn't we pull that out and take a very efficient floor plate and then draw it back so it would actually also abide by the rules? It was a very pragmatic argument that the city really couldn't respond to, because they just said, you know what, it fits. Okay, you can do it. So what the client discovered is that it would cost about 20% more in concrete and sort of structural gymnastics to build it, but he was actually getting 50% more units. And so it's the idea of how can you take something, let's say a technological advancement or a material advancement, and allow that to unlock certain value in a site or in a location that hasn't historically been able to be developed. So anytime that you create, let's say, new facade structures or new structural systems, you should then look at all of the sites that have been undeveloped and see if there's suddenly a potential to develop them. It's very similar to the way that the Flatiron building would never have been built if it was just 5 or 6 stories tall. The pure value of that site was unlocked with the Otis elevator. And once the elevator allowed you to go up 20 floors, that unlocked enough potential in the site to actually develop it. So just as the Flatiron is in New York, we have the Fat Iron in Vancouver. So, and you know, finally, the reason that we're actually in New York is because of this project. This is West 57th. It's a 720 apartments with a courtyard right in the middle, and it's a project that basically mimics what Central Park is to the entire city. This kind of green oasis we're trying to bring into our project, so that you literally have New York is made up of skyscrapers historically. For the past 60, 70 years, that's literally all that's been built. In Europe, you have the courtyard. What happens when you take a skyscraper and a courtyard and you kind of meld them and create a stepchild or a love child? Well, you get the court scraper. And so the court scraper is the idea that you have a wonderful courtyard, but you raise it off of the ground, so you have a full podium. We pick up one edge to create the tower. Sun is still coming in to the courtyard. You still preserve the views from this building back here across the other building, and you only have one elevator, one lobby with 2 elevators that take you all the way up. So it's very, very exciting at this stage to be able to sort of show you a couple of construction shots and really say that this is becoming a reality. Because I was just at the site like 2 nights ago. This is when you're in the actual apartments and you're looking out over the courtyard and across to the Hudson River. This is from about 6 months ago. And here's a few more recent. We're now on the 18th floor, so we're somewhere right there. And it's really a new species of building in New York. Where everyone is going to have very much the same view.
Yeah, I'm out at Brooklyn. Now I'm down in Tribeca, right next to the Narrow. But I'll be hood forever. I'm the new Sinatra. And since I made it here, I can make it anywhere. Yeah, they love me everywhere. I used to cop in Harlem. All of my Dominicanos right there up on Broadway. Brought me back to that McDonald's. Took it to my stash spot, 560 State Street. Catch me in the kitchen like a Simmons whipping pastry. Statue of Liberty. Long live the World Trade. Long live the King, yo. I'm from the Empire State. Yeah. These streets will make you feel brand new. Big lights will inspire you. Let's hear it for New York, New York, New York.
Thank you very much.